In this video, we're going to look at the basics of how to draw functions and find the equations. And so I find it helpful just to boil back to these 4 basic steps for all of the graphs. And if you ever need, you can override any step and jump to the end if you get here. So the first thing that I like to draw, or if I've been given a graph and I'm trying to work out the equation, is the asymptote. So sub that in first, then draw your y-intercept by letting x be naught, then draw your x-intercept by letting y be naught. And if you're stuffed and you feel like you don't have enough information to be able to finish drawing your graph, then I suggest subbing in x is 1 or x is minus 1, something like that. And so what it would look like is you just put 1 into the graph that you have and see what y value it spits out. And once you have that point, you can then probably play dot to dot and have enough information to draw your graph. So that's a simple way just to start. The override rule is if you ever notice that you're missing one letter, then you just sub in 1 point. Again, whether you've been given a graph and in the graph there's a point missing, then you can sub that into your equation, or whether you've been given a function and you're trying to find out this missing letter, keep boiling back to this. If I'm missing a letter, I can just, in this case, you would have had something like this, and you're trying to find P, so maybe you'd sub in a point here, 1 and minus 8. So you'd sub this for x and y, and it would reveal P. So this really makes a difference, and you want to keep coming back to this throughout the entire section of functions. Some bonus stuff that's different to what I've written in these 4 steps is the parabolas. To get the turning point, it's minus b over 2a. And that just gives you the x value. And like this, once you'd worked out the x value, you'd sub it into the equation to get the y value of the turning point. Fx or gx are just names for y, so they basically just mean y. But why do they end up giving us fx, gx? It's just so that they can direct us to an exact graph. When we get into function notation, like f of 3, we know the language that it should have been f of x, but now there's a 3, so now we sub 3 in for x. And so it is helpful when you've got multiple graphs, but it helps just to boil back to the basics that just means y. Straight line, if you don't have the y-intercept, just work out the gradient. And so if I didn't get the straight line and they gave me something like this, then I can just work out the gradient first, and imagine I'd worked out the gradient. So that would be change in y, 6 over change in x, 4. 6 over 4, which is 3 over 2. So imagine that's the y equals mx plus c, and I know the gradient is 3 over 4. Again, what do you do when you're missing a letter? You just sub in a point. So you could pick either point and sub those values for x and y, and you'll be able to get c. In a hyperbola, rather than just automatically, when you're stuffed, subbing in 1 or minus 1, it's helpful to sub 1 away from the x asymptote to get another point. And so if you've got a x asymptote, let's do it up here. If you've got a x asymptote of minus 3 and you're feeling a little bit stuffed and you're not sure what point to put on these 2 graphs, I would just sub 1 away. So if that's minus 3, I would go 1 away, so it's minus 4. I must sub minus 4 back into the equation. If this is minus 3, you could sub in minus 2. That's 1 away. And you can sub that back into the equation. Why do I always do 1 away? Because the answer you get will always be a nice juicy number rather than some weird decimals. And then the last little tip in this video is for exponentials, the base can't equal a negative. You'd get no solution. And so if you've simplified a question, subbed in, you're trying to work out the x-intercept, and you end up with something like this, you can't just say x equals minus 2, because you cancelled the 2 big 2's, the bases of 2. An exponent with a base can never equal a negative, and so that would just be no solution. In this case, you'd have no x-intercepts, and you'd probably end up being stuffed, so you'd have to let x be 1 or something like that. I hope that this was helpful just to give you an overview of some of the really important basics that you're going to just keep coming back to throughout this section for the next year or two. If you did, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this with your friends.